Since Mom passed away on Valentine's Day last week, Deborah and I thought we should provide a tribute to some of the many loves of Edna Sheen over her 87 years.
One of her first loves that stayed with her throughout her lifetime was her birthplace, Prince Edward Island. In her early days, Mum was brought up by both her mother Blanche and stepfather Claire, and also by Grandma Maggie and Granddaddy John. If Mum got a chill and started to shake from eating homemade ice cream too quickly, Grandma Maggie would put her in a basin of warm water with mustard powder until she was warm again. And yet Mum adored her. As her mother Blanche was one of 7 sisters, Mum always had lots of relatives around to keep an eye on her. But she spent a lot of her time with her close buddies and cousins, well, virtually sisters, Glenn and Jean, often getting into trouble. For example, one day she climbed into a tire so Cousin Glenn could roll her down the road, only to get tied up in a barbed wire fence. Another time, as a 5-year-old, she climbed up a tall ladder so she could join her Uncle Alan on the roof.
Even after she left PEI, she still loved the island. Her cousin Marlene Campbell wrote a wonderful book on holiday stories from rural PEI, told by islanders, including my mom. As Marlene said, she left PEI as a teenager to pursue a career in Ontario, but her island roots remain strong and she often returns home. I fondly remember many a trip when her parents would pick us up on the last day of school for a driving trip to the island. It was a long 3-day drive, so at night we would stop at a beach where they could run us like dogs to burn off our excess energy. The trips were wonderful family gatherings, although I often had trouble keeping all the names straight. Throughout her life, Mum continued her frequent visits to see the island and the islanders, and sometimes the island came to her, no matter what age.
But Mum decided to branch out from the island starting in 1949 to begin a career in nursing at the Royal Victoria Hospital in Montreal. While she was initially homesick, it wasn't long before she warmed to the social aspect of the Royal Vic. Her maiden name of Cameron quickly earned her the nickname of Cammy, something her husband and friends continued to call her for years until she retired. As usual, Mum made friends very easily at the nursing school, as evidenced by a quote in the RVH yearbook. "She's not too shy, yet never bold. Our Edna has a heart of gold." But I understand she could be a bit of a mischief maker as well. For example, one night, Mum and her buddies, Olga, Macy, Grace, and Ruth, tried to sneak back into residence after some illicit activity on the town. Unfortunately, a night of revelry had left them a bit clumsy, and they managed to drop and break a full bottle of liquor on the floor right in front of the nursing station. Mum loved being a nurse and went on to work at a number of other hospitals, including Cornwall General, Sunnybrook, Lakeshore Hospital in Point Claire, and Scarborough General. Her experience included working with war vets and in the surgical, pediatric, and burn units. But she never forgot her old buddies from RVH, who became lifelong friends. And also her many nursing friends she made while working in the wards of other hospitals. There was always some reunion going on, whether for important anniversaries or just as an excuse to get together for a party with some dear old friends.
Like many of her friends, Mum was ahead of her times and combined a successful career with a happy family life. She married Doug Sheen, the love of her life, in July of 1953. Now, the story of how they met has been replayed many times in the Sheen household. Dad was working as an insurance salesman at the time and knocked on the door of the flat that Mom was renting with some of her nursing buddies. His insurance push was quickly dismissed, but as he turned to leave, he saw this lovely brunette descending the stairs. Realizing she was off to work at the hospital, he quickly suggested he could, quote, drop her off on the way. And the rest, of course, is history, fortunately, otherwise we wouldn't be talking to you now.
Now, for those of us who believe a marriage is a union of best friends, Mum and Dad were a perfect example of that and an inspiration to the two of us. It didn't matter if she had to clean his filthy fish or cook the many desserts he loved or support him in his Alzheimer years. Mom was always there for him, like best friends are.
Mom also had a lifelong passion for sewing and colorful clothing. She had a real knack for sewing and could make outfits that really sang. She was always on the lookout for fabrics, too often with me in tow, and although I liked most of her outfits, sometimes they didn't quite work for me. And I do remember her being rather annoyed when I turned two thumbs down on the leisure suit she had been making me. But whether she made her clothing or not, she was always hip with the times and willing to try different looks. And her talents were warmly received later in life when she sewed some excellent clothing for her granddaughters.
But as she said to me a couple of weeks ago, she really loved being a mom. And we all looked up to her, even when she rinsed our mouth out with soap for swearing, or held our uneaten potatoes in the fridge for breakfast, and certainly when she wielded her trusty ruler for our misbehavior. But she was always there to provide a friendly push, a pat on the back, a shoulder to cry on, or to find a way to brighten your day.
And before long, she was welcoming new sons and daughters into the family. Mother also loved a good laugh. Many a tale of a day at the hospital would end with, quote, "and we were all killing ourselves laughing," unquote. I often wondered just how serious nursing really was. She truly could find humor everywhere, from the sublime, sort of, to the ridiculous.
Even in later life, her good humor shone through to the support staff who worked with her in Barrie, Orangeville, and Shelburne. She was happy to be a Viking wife at Mill Creek Long-Term Care in Barrie, or pose as a British magistrate at Dufferin Oaks. Mum's passion for life also extended to the great outdoors. In the 60s, this meant relaxing camping trips. That is when her son wasn't throwing up from eating too many blueberries.
But camping became tiresome and creature comforts became more important. When Dad hesitated on getting a cottage, she said, and I quote, "If you won't buy it, I will." And she did. Before long, she had overcome her fear of water, cold weather, and just doing nothing, especially with good friends.
Now, as a young woman, the trip from PEI to Montreal was probably her toughest, but later in life she wanted to do a lot more traveling. Initially, she and Dad did smaller trips through Ontario and Alberta, then the Caribbean, but before long it was Antarctic, China, Turkey, Australia, the Galapagos, and a lot of other places I've forgotten. And even when Dad could no longer travel, Mum was still keen.
But her roots were still at home with her family, and none were stronger than with her grandchildren, Heather and Carolyn. Mom and Dad were actually away in China when they were born, but it wasn't long before she was smothering them with affection. She had a special bond with them from a young age to provide food, instruction, education, or just a shoulder to lean on.
She always had fun with her granddaughters, and she was very happy to welcome their partners, Matt and Chris, to the family. So clearly the highlight of her last year was Heather's wedding in July, when she was happily surrounded by her whole family.
Thanks very much for joining us to share the loves of Edna Sheen's life.